It was just another ordinary day at Walmart. The parking lot buzzed with shoppers going about their daily errands, their faces carrying the usual mix of focus and indifference. But among them was one man who saw things differently, an ex-military veteran whose trained instincts had kept him alive through countless unpredictable situations. Jackson, a retired soldier in his early 60s, walked towards the entrance, casually pushing his cart. Age had slowed his steps, but his sharp eyes still carried the same intensity that had served him well in the field. He wasn't looking for trouble, but experience had taught him that trouble often found those who least expected it. As he moved forward, something unusual caught his attention: a young girl, no older than 9 or 10, standing near the entrance. She had a bright, innocent smile on her face, but what struck Jackson the most was the way she was waving directly at him. At first, he thought it was just a mistake. Maybe she was waving at someone behind him. But a quick glance around revealed no one else nearby. It was just him. The small detail sent a chill down his spine. A simple wave shouldn't have meant anything, but something felt off. His military instincts kicked in. Years of experience had sharpened his ability to sense when something wasn't right. And right now, looking into the girl's eyes, he could see something hidden beneath that smile. Fear. Jackson's heartbeat quickened. Was she trying to get his attention for a reason? Or was he overthinking it? He scanned his surroundings, searching for anything unusual. Everything seemed normal: shoppers walking in and out, cars pulling in and out of the parking lot. But that nagging feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer. The girl's smile wavered for just a second, her eyes flickering toward something or someone behind her. And then, just as quickly, she fell silent. Who was watching her from the shadows? And why did she suddenly look afraid? Jackson knew he had two choices: ignore the feeling and go about his day, or trust his instincts and take action. What he didn't know was that his next move would change everything. Jackson's pulse quickened as he studied the little girl's face. She was still standing there, her small fingers curled slightly as if she wanted to wave again but wasn't sure she should. Her eyes darted to the side for just a fraction of a second, almost unnoticeable, but Jackson caught it. He followed her gaze. A few feet away, near the Walmart entrance, a tall man stood leaning against a pillar. He was dressed casually: jeans, a hoodie, baseball cap pulled low over his face, but something about him felt wrong. He wasn't shopping, wasn't waiting for anyone. His posture was too stiff, too unnatural, like he was forcing himself to blend in. And the way his head was tilted ever so slightly, watching the girl from the corner of his eye, made Jackson's stomach tighten. Jackson had spent years in war zones, places where the smallest details could mean the difference between life and death. And right now, everything in his gut screamed that this wasn't normal. The girl lowered her hand and pressed it against her stomach, as if she was holding something tightly. Jackson took another step closer. "Hey there, kiddo," he said, keeping his voice light. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to speak, but then she glanced at the man again and quickly shut her mouth. That was all the confirmation Jackson needed. He bent down just a little to meet her eye level. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked gently. "Your parents?" The girl swallowed hard. She was clutching something in her hand now, a piece of paper, wrinkled and small, like it had been folded too many times. Her fingers trembled as she hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Jackson didn't push. He just stood there, patient but alert, every instinct on high alert. Then, so quickly it was almost like a reflex, she shoved the piece of paper toward him. Jackson took it, careful not to startle her, and unfolded it slowly. The words inside were scribbled in shaky, uneven handwriting. 3 simple words that sent a chill through his veins. "Help me. Please." His grip on the paper tightened, but his face remained neutral. He knew better than to react too quickly. If the girl was scared, if she was in danger, the last thing he wanted to do was make it obvious that he was onto something. He forced a small smile and nodded, as if she had just handed him a grocery list. Then, with practiced ease, he slipped the paper into his pocket. "Got it," he murmured softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm gonna help you, okay?" The girl's eyes glistened for a second, but she gave the tiniest nod. Jackson straightened, his body relaxing just enough to avoid suspicion. His mind, however, was already racing. He had no idea what kind of trouble this little girl was in. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't walking away. He turned slightly, pretending to glance at the shelves near the entrance, but his focus was entirely on the man in the hoodie. The guy had noticed. His posture had stiffened, his fingers twitching slightly at his sides. He knew Jackson had seen something. But Jackson had the advantage. This wasn't his first time dealing with a situation that required careful maneuvering. He had been trained for high-stress environments, and he wasn't about to let fear dictate his next move. "All right, kiddo," he said, his voice casual. "You wanna walk inside with me?" The girl hesitated for a moment before nodding. Jackson gave her a reassuring wink, then placed a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the entrance. The whole time, he kept his peripheral vision on the man in the hoodie. Would he follow? Would he make a move? Jackson didn't have to wait long for his answer. As soon as they stepped inside, he heard it, a quiet but distinct sound behind him. Footsteps. Not hurried, not obvious. But deliberate. The man was following them. Jackson kept his composure, leading the girl toward the aisles. The store was crowded, filled with the usual mix of families, elderly shoppers, and employees stocking shelves. That worked to Jackson's advantage. If something was about to go down, he had plenty of witnesses. Still, he needed to act fast. He bent down slightly, keeping his voice low but firm. "I need you to trust me, okay?" he murmured. "Do you know where your parents are?" The girl shook her head. "All right," he said. "Stay close to me." He guided her toward the customer service desk, where an older woman in a blue Walmart vest was helping a customer. Jackson approached quickly, keeping one eye on the man in the hoodie. "Excuse me," Jackson said, his voice calm but authoritative. "I think this young lady needs some help." The Walmart employee glanced down at the girl and immediately noticed the tension in her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Before the girl could answer, Jackson felt it, that creeping sense of danger, like a storm rolling in before the thunder hits. He turned just in time to see the man in the hoodie duck behind an aisle. That was it. That was all the confirmation Jackson needed. Whoever this guy was, whatever he wanted, he wasn't about to let him slip away. Jackson glanced at the Walmart employee. "Call security," he said quietly. "Now." And with that, he turned, ready to confront the man who had been watching them. But when he looked back toward the aisle, the man was gone. Jackson's jaw tightened as he scanned the aisle where the man had been just moments ago. He was gone. Just vanished, like he had never been there in the first place. But Jackson knew better. A guy like that doesn't just walk away, not when he had been watching so closely, following so deliberately. He took a slow, steady breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He needed to think. The girl was still beside him, shifting nervously on her feet, her fingers curling into small fists. She knew something, maybe more than she had let on, but right now, Jackson needed to keep her safe. The Walmart employee at the customer service desk picked up the phone, her fingers pressing the buttons in a hurry. "Security will be here in just a minute," she assured them. Jackson gave her a nod, but his instincts told him that a minute might be too long. If the man had disappeared, it wasn't because he had given up, it was because he was planning his next move. He crouched down next to the girl again, keeping his voice low. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, as if even saying it out loud could somehow put her in more danger. But then, in the softest voice, she whispered, "Lena." Jackson offered a reassuring smile. "Okay, Lena. You're doing great. I just need to know, do you know that man? The one outside?" Lena's eyes darted toward the aisle where the man had been. She pressed her lips together, then slowly shook her head. "No," she whispered. "But, I think he knows me." Jackson felt a chill crawl down his spine. "What do you mean?" Lena swallowed hard, glancing around as if she was afraid to say too much. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "He's been following me." Jackson's fingers curled into a fist. This wasn't just some random situation. This was planned. Deliberate. And if Lena had noticed she was being followed, it meant it had been going on for a while. "Where are your parents?" Jackson asked gently. Lena hesitated again. She shifted from foot to foot, her small shoulders rising and falling with uneven breaths. "I was with my mom," she said. "But she told me to wait in the toy aisle while she checked out. She should be here." Jackson's mind worked quickly. If Lena's mother was in the store, then why hadn't she come looking for her yet? He didn't want to panic the girl, But something wasn't adding up. He glanced toward the entrance, expecting security to show up any second now. But instead, something else caught his attention. A woman, frantic, searching, rushing toward the customer service desk. Lena turned her head just as the woman's eyes landed on her. Lena. The girl barely had time to react before the woman, her mother, no doubt, swept her into a tight embrace. Relief washed over her face, but Jackson could still see the fear in her eyes. "I was looking everywhere for you," her mother murmured, stroking her daughter's hair. "I turned around for 1 second, and you were gone." Jackson stood up, clearing his throat to get the woman's attention. I don't want to alarm you, but I think your daughter was being followed." The woman's expression shifted from relief to sheer terror in an instant. She clutched Lena even tighter, her hands shaking. "What? Who? Where?" Jackson kept his voice calm, steady. "Tall guy, hoodie, baseball cap. He was watching her outside, and when I walked her in, he followed. But now," he glanced toward the aisles. "Now, he's gone." Lena's mother's breath hitched. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. This morning, I thought I saw someone outside our apartment. I told myself it was nothing. But," she shook her head, gripping her daughter's shoulders. Jackson frowned. This wasn't the first time, was it? The woman's face turned pale. She looked at Lena, then back at Jackson. "No," she admitted. "A few days ago, I noticed a car parked outside my building. Same car, same spot, 4 hours. When I left to take Lena to school, it drove away. And then, last night, I thought someone was watching us from across the street." Jackson's mind pieced it together quickly. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching Lena, and now, they were getting bolder. Before he could say another word, movement caught his eye near the entrance. His body tensed. The man. He was back. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another figure stood near him, shorter, stockier, wearing a dark jacket. They weren't looking directly at Jackson, but he could feel it. They weren't just here for Lena anymore. They were watching him, too. Jackson's body went rigid as he spotted the man near the entrance. His instincts, honed by years of experience, told him this wasn't a coincidence. The man had disappeared only to return with backup. That meant one thing: this wasn't just some random stalker. This was planned. Coordinated. And now, Jackson was part of it. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Lena's mother was still clutching her daughter tightly, completely unaware of the new threat that had just walked in. If Jackson was going to keep them safe, he needed to act fast. He leaned in close to Lena's mother, keeping his voice low but firm. "Listen carefully," he said. "Those men near the entrance, they're watching us. Don't turn around. Don't react. Just follow my lead." Lena's mother stiffened. Her fingers tightened on her daughter's arm, but she did exactly as Jackson said. She didn't turn around. She just nodded, her breathing unsteady. Jackson glanced at the Walmart employee, who was still standing behind the counter, wide-eyed. "Where's security?" he asked, his tone urgent. They should be here any second," she stammered. Jackson gritted his teeth. He didn't have a second. If those men decided to move, they wouldn't wait for security to show up. He had to get Lena and her mother out of there. His mind worked fast. The front entrance was out of the question. The men were standing too close, waiting, watching. But Walmart had multiple exits. If he could get them to the back of the store, they might have a chance. He turned to Lena's mother. "We're heading toward the back," he said quietly. "Stay close to me, and no matter what, don't stop." She nodded, gripping Lena's hand tightly. Jackson started moving, his steps slow and deliberate, keeping his posture relaxed so he wouldn't draw attention. But every nerve in his body was on high alert. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the tension crackling in the air like a storm about to break. He led them down an aisle lined with shelves stacked high with cereal boxes. Halfway through, he risked a glance over his shoulder. The men were moving. They weren't running. Not yet. But they had stepped away from the entrance, following at a distance, weaving through the aisles. Jackson's pulse pounded. They weren't backing off. That meant they weren't afraid of being seen. That meant they had a plan. He picked up the pace, guiding Lena and her mother toward the back of the store. Just as they reached the electronics section, He spotted a set of doors marked employees only. A way out. He turned to the Walmart worker, who was now watching them nervously. "We need to get through those doors," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Now." The employee hesitated. "Sir, Jackson didn't have time for explanations. He pulled out his wallet, flashed his old military ID, and locked eyes with the employee. "Open the door." The worker gulped but nodded, fumbling with his keycard. Behind them, Jackson heard footsteps quicken. They were getting closer. His grip tightened. Every muscle in his body braced for the moment they would have to run. The keycard beeped, the door unlocked, and Jackson pushed it open. "Go," he told Lena's mother. "Now." She hesitated for only a second before pulling Lena through. Jackson stepped in behind them and shut the door just as he saw movement at the end of the aisle. The men had arrived. And the moment Jackson locked eyes with them through the small window in the door, he knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. Jackson held his breath as he peered through the small window in the door. The two men had stopped at the end of the aisle, their faces unreadable, but their posture spoke volumes. They weren't just searching anymore, they were waiting. Calculating. And that sent a new wave of unease through him. Something wasn't right. He turned to Lena's mother, who was holding her daughter close, her hands trembling. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low but firm. "These doors won't slow them down for long." She nodded quickly, glancing back toward the locked door as if she expected it to burst open any second. Jackson scanned the dimly lit employee corridor, searching for the best way out. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with storage rooms and stacks of unopened merchandise. A few signs pointed toward an emergency exit at the far end. That was their best shot. He placed a steadying hand on Lena's shoulder. "Stay close to your mom, all right?" he told her softly. She gave a small nod, her eyes wide with fear but determined. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. Jackson kept one eye on their path ahead and another on their backs, every muscle in his body on high alert. Halfway down the corridor, a loud metallic clang rang out from behind them. Jackson spun around. The door. The men were inside. His heart slammed against his ribs. "Go," he ordered, pushing Lena and her mother forward. They broke into a run, the emergency exit now only a few yards away. Jackson could hear the hurried footsteps behind them, gaining speed, closing in fast. He reached for the push bar on the exit door. And that's when he saw it. The door was chained shut. Jackson cursed under his breath. Someone had locked it from the outside. Lena's mother let out a shaky breath. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely above a panic. Jackson's mind raced. They were trapped. And if these men had locked the exit, then they had planned for this. This wasn't just a chase. It was a trap. He turned sharply, searching for another way out. His gaze landed on a storage room to their left. The door was slightly ajar, the lights off. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. "In here," he whispered, ushering them inside. He pulled the door shut just as the men rounded the corner. Through the small gap, Jackson watched as they stopped outside the chained exit, their expressions unreadable. Then one of them pulled out a phone. Jackson's stomach twisted. They weren't just following orders. They were reporting to someone. He leaned in closer, straining to hear. The man's voice was low, but the words sent a chill down Jackson's spine. "We have them." Jackson's grip tightened on the door handle. This wasn't over. Whoever these men were, they weren't working alone. And now, someone else knew exactly where they were. Jackson's pulse pounded as he listened to the man's voice on the phone. "We have them." The words echoed in his mind, and he knew time was running out. They weren't just dealing with two guys, there was someone else pulling the strings. Someone who was waiting for confirmation. Lena clutched her mother's hand, her small body trembling. Her mother held her close, trying to keep her calm, but Jackson could see the fear in her eyes. He had to act fast. He scanned the dark storage room, searching for anything that could help. Stacks of boxes, a metal shelving unit, and an old mop bucket. Nothing useful. Then his eyes landed on a side door near the back. He moved toward it cautiously, testing the handle. It was locked. His jaw tightened. He turned back toward the storage shelves, quickly running his hands along the metal frame. His fingers brushed against something cold, bolt cutters. Probably left by an employee. Jackson didn't waste a second. He grabbed the cutters and rushed to the chained emergency exit, keeping low to avoid being seen through the small window in the door. His hands worked fast, the metal creaking as he applied pressure. A loud snap echoed down the hallway. Lena's mother gasped softly, but Jackson was already pushing the door open. A rush of cool night air hit them, but before they could move, footsteps thundered toward them. They had been heard. "Go," Jackson urged, pushing Lena and her mother through first. The men shouted behind them, their heavy boots pounding against the concrete floor. Jackson turned just in time to see one of them lunging forward. He barely dodged in time, grabbing the door and slamming it shut behind him. One of the men cursed loudly, yanking at the handle. But the emergency exit had locked behind them. They were stuck, at least for now. Jackson didn't wait to see how long it would hold. He grabbed Lena's mother's arm and led them around the side of the building, moving fast. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few scattered cars. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A black SUV. Engine running. Waiting. Jackson's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about those two men inside. Someone else had been expecting them to come out. And they were ready. He slowed, shielding Lena and her mother with his body. His mind raced. They couldn't just run blindly into the lot. If the SUV was here to pick up the men inside, there was no telling who was behind the wheel or what they planned to do next. Just then, distant sirens cut through the air. The police. Relief crashed through Jackson, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The men inside would know they were out of time. And the driver of that SUV? They had a choice to make. The vehicle suddenly lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. But instead of coming toward them, it sped away. Jackson exhaled. Whoever they weren't sticking around to get caught. Moments later, red and blue lights filled the parking lot. Officers swarmed the store, guns drawn, moving in fast. Jackson kept his hands visible as they approached. "We need help," he said quickly. "There are two men inside following this woman and her daughter." The officers nodded, moving past him, heading straight for the store. Lena's mother pulled her daughter into a tight hug, tears spilling down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at Jackson. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Jackson gave a small nod, his mind still racing. This wasn't just a random kidnapping attempt. It had been planned, coordinated. And whoever was behind it, they had gotten away. For now. But as he looked down at Lena, who clung tightly to her mother, he knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't be coming back for her. Not while he was watching. Jackson stood in the Walmart parking lot, watching as police officers moved swiftly, securing the store and questioning witnesses. The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across the pavement, and the tension in his body slowly began to ease. Lena clung to her mother, her small face pressed against her shoulder, still shaken but safe. That was all that mattered. A detective approached Jackson, notebook in hand, eyes sharp with curiosity. "You were the one who called it in?" he asked. Jackson nodded. "I noticed the men watching her inside. When they followed us, I knew something was off." The detective scribbled something down before looking up. "You have military experience." "Yeah," Jackson admitted. "Retired now, but instincts don't just disappear." The detective gave a knowing nod. That probably saved their lives tonight. He glanced toward Lena and her mother, then back at Jackson. "We've got officers securing the scene, but whoever was in that SUV got away. Any idea what they wanted?" Jackson exhaled, his mind replaying every moment. The way the men had waited, how they coordinated, the locked exit, it hadn't been a random crime of opportunity. It was targeted. "I don't know who they were, but this wasn't just some robbery or a simple abduction attempt," Jackson said. "They knew she was here. They came prepared." The detective frowned, flipping a page in his notebook. "We'll run background checks, pull security footage, see if we can ID them. But if they were professionals, they'll have covered their tracks." Jackson's jaw tightened. That was what worried him. If these men were part of something bigger, then this wasn't just over because they'd failed tonight. Lena's mother stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Do you think they'll come back?" Jackson turned to her, looking into her worried eyes. "Not if I have anything to do with it." The detective sighed, tucking his notebook away. We'll have an officer escort you home and patrol the area for the next few nights. If anything feels off, call us immediately." Lena's mother nodded, tightening her hold on her daughter. Jackson could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of fear, the helplessness of not knowing why this had happened. Jackson reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and quickly jotted down his number. He handed it to her. "If you need anything at all, you call me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she gave a grateful nod. "Thank you," she whispered. Lena, still gripping her mother's hand, looked up at Jackson with wide eyes. "You're like a real-life hero," she said softly. Jackson felt a lump in his throat. He had spent years in the military, seen things most people never would. But in that moment, hearing those words from a little girl who had just been through something terrifying, he felt something shift inside him. "I just did what anyone should do," he said gently. The officers finished taking statements, and Lena and her mother were escorted to a police car. As Jackson watched them drive away, he felt an unsettling mix of relief and unease. The immediate danger had passed, but the mystery remained. Who were those men? Why had they been after Lena and her mother? And, most importantly, would they try again? As he walked back to his truck, the night air cool against his skin, he knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not really. Somewhere out there, someone had been waiting for those men to deliver Lena and her mother. They would be angry that the plan had failed. They would be regrouping. And Jackson had just put himself in their way. He started his truck, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Maybe he had retired from the military, but tonight had reminded him of something important. The fight to protect people never really ended. And if those men ever came back, this time, Jackson would be ready,